Hey folks, thank you for joining us again for our weekly Texas Counts update. I know that folks are getting on the line right now, so we will give it a couple of minutes before we get started. But thanks again so much for joining us today, and we'll get started in about 2 minutes. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone to the Texas Counts Weekly Update for the week of April 13th. You are joined by Dr. Lila Valencia from the Texas Demographic Center, Genesis Sanchez from the NALEO Educational Fund, and I'm Katie Martin-Lightfoot from the Center for Public Policy Priorities. And we will be walking you through all things happening in Texas about the census. Also very excited because we are joined by Ms. Sarah Stubblefield from the City of Arlington. She's a senior planner there, and she's going to be walking through some of the City of Arlington's outreach efforts, but also talking about how they have really utilized data to help promote the census in Arlington. So super excited to have her join us today. And just a walkthrough of our agenda. I know it looks the same every week. We'll try and keep it consistent, but of course, we start things off with our welcome. Then Genesis will walk us through the 2020 census updates, and then Dr. Valencia will walk us through the data, kind of see how Texas is doing in our self-response period. And then Sarah will talk about the efforts happening in the City of Arlington, and then we'll wrap things up with some 2020 census outreach, and then of course leave time at the end for Q&A. But folks on the line know that at any point in time, feel free to pop a question in the Q&A box or chat us if you have any questions, comments. We also really like when you guys share your ideas in the chat box as well, and we would love to amplify and lift those up. But thanks again for joining us, and I will pass it off to Genesis to get us started.
Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. So I don't have very many updates on the operations front. I'm going to cover a few things. Thank you, Katie. So as of today, as of right now, this call, the Census Bureau has still continued to suspend their 2020 census field operations until this Wednesday, April 15th. What this means is that we anticipate that the Bureau is going to make an announcement about both this deadline and the actual deadline to respond, the total deadline of August 14th today. So keep an eye out for emails from us, from Katie. We will probably convene a stakeholder call to kind of discuss these changes and to think about what that means for our outreach and our communities. But as of right now, nothing has changed, or I should say as of this call, nothing has changed. As many of you know, the mailed paper questionnaires have gone out this week. So we have heard some issues with people saying, well, I'm anticipating that I'm going to get my paper form this week. I was told by this or that. And they're rolling out a little slowly, as you can imagine. The U.S. Postal Service is also dealing with their own set of issues around this during this time, and so they're moving a little slowly as well. So just tell people to hang on tight. They'll get their form if they haven't gotten it already. One of the things that I mentioned last week was that the callback option, originally the Bureau had a callback option, and then when it came to responding via phone, and then what happened was that with COVID-19, they had to have less staff in their offices, and so they actually temporarily paused this, and so they brought it back, and it is already live for the following languages that are here on the screen. So that's English, Cantonese, Korean, Mandarin, Russian, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And so what the callback option is, you call and they'll let you know, hey, we're experiencing long wait times. If you leave your number, we'll give you a call back and we'll fill out your form with you. Very easy, very simple, and that way people don't they don't feel like they're spending too much time on the phone. We were hearing of wait calls of about between like 30 to 40 minutes, which is really, really long, and does definitely dissuade people from filling it out. So we're really happy that this came back, and we're hopeful that it continues. That callback option is going to continue to be available, or it's going to start being available for other languages on April 14th. So those languages are Arabic, French, Haitian Creole, Japanese, Polish, Portuguese, and Tagalog. So again, that when tomorrow, this callback option is going to be available for those languages. I also wanted to share that we're hosting a Spanish Train the Trainer. My colleagues in California are leading this effort. It's going to be covering 2 days from August 16th to August 17th. The idea behind this is to continue to update people with the same kind of operational changes, while giving a little bit more context and offering a little bit more of the outreach piece, like how can you do this in your own communities? We know that there's a lot of need for Spanish content, and so if you have organizers, staff who might benefit from this, please send them to that link, and we'd be happy to have them join us. Totally free, available to anybody who's interested. Next slide, please. So last thing I'll share is that this week we're hosting a Latinx Week of Action. Tomorrow we'll be having a Twitter chat, and the idea behind this is that a lot of the national Latino groups that do advocacy around all things voting, census, immigration, decided to do a week of action to kind of highlight the need and the urgency of increasing the count amongst Latinos. And so if you'd like to join us, please do so. Continue to use our hashtags. If you want to continue participating in this a little bit more, feel free to send me an email, and I'd be happy to talk through more with it, with anybody. And I think that's it for me. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Genesis. And I'm sure if anybody is interested in joining those Train the Trainers, Genesis will pop the links to those in the chat box. Now I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Valencia to talk us through the self-response data in Texas.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So first I'm going to start, I guess, by giving you kind of the general the sort of the slide where you can get the tools to help you monitor your self-response rates as they're coming back to from the Census Bureau. And so you can get that from a self-response map from the Bureau, the familiar map of the CUNY hard to count map, and then as well as the newer Census Bureau Tableau dashboard. And we have the links there for you to be able to access that information. On this next slide, I'll share data that are coming from the Census Bureau self-response map. And so I have a couple of good news to share, I guess. Texas has moved up to 40th this week. So we have now, there's an estimated 70.8 million households that have responded nationwide, and about 5.3 million of those are here in Texas. Like I said, we're at 43.4% response rate. That compares to the national response of 47.9%. And then Minnesota is like, leaving everyone in the dust with their 57.2 response rate. But we've surpassed When we moved up to 42nd, we had surpassed New York. They, of course, were dealing with a lot of the brunt of the COVID-19 crisis here in the US. And then this week, we have passed South Carolina and Oklahoma. And so now we're in 40th. So we're, you can look at it one way. We're either not in the bottom 10 if you if you don't include DC, but we still clearly have a long way to go. So I also wanted to point out before we go to the next slide, just at the top right corner of the image, there's a couple of places, they keep making changes and modifications to the self response tools from the Census Bureau. And so where it says rankings here, you can double click that and you'll get the dashboard that I'll show you in a few minutes. And then the click icon to open or close the share menu gives you another way to be able to share your actual selection of the data that you're looking at. So you can embed that on a website or share it in social media. And I'll keep letting you know if they make any changes like that. On the next slide, you'll see how Texas is doing in terms of self-response and at the county level. And so again, the large suburban counties are doing really, really well. You can see that in the lighter blue sort of counties in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Fort Bend down by the Harris County area, and then Williamson County right to the north of Austin. More rural areas still are needing additional attention. Although when we start looking at other, indicators of response, we're seeing that they're having higher daily increases. And in the next slide, I'll show you a little bit about how we're faring in terms of daily increase. So this looks at each individual bar is the day-to-day increase in response, and then the blue line is our overall response and increase in self-response. So right now, Texas is at about 43.4% self-response. And so you see that in the blue line. But what you'll notice is in the tallest bar there is for April 1st, right? So Census Day, we really did have a surge in census response. But since then, this is a little bit of the not so good news, we've had a real drop in our day-to-day increase in response. So on average, we had been increasing by 1.4 percentage points, but after the census day, we have only increased about 0.69 percentage points. So it's dropped by, half. And so we really need to start to get creative and letting people know that census day is just a reference date. The census count continues, and we really want to continue to promote and motivate people to participate in the census. And this is what I was talking about when I was talking about the daily increases. Even though the daily increase post census day for the state as a whole is about 0.7, for some of those more rural areas, we've started to see daily increases of over 1%. And so it could be that now they're starting to receive some of their forms in the mail, or they're starting to get that message from partners in the area, but they've been having slightly higher response rates post-census. Next slide, please. And so then this is the dashboard here that the Census Bureau has put together. So when you double click on that self-response map for the rankings, it'll take you to this Tableau dashboard, and you'll see the rankings for the state in the middle panel, and then you can see household responses by state. Now these responses, of course, are just a rate of based on the household response and the average household size that they're basing to say how many households, or not household size, but how many households have responded, if that many percent, or if that percentage has responded so far. And these are based on ACS data. And you can see the national response rate in the left panel, and then the bottom half of the dashboard can, if you'll go to the next slide, will show you you can actually select a state. So here I've selected Texas, and it'll rank each of the counties for you as well as the cities. And so we can see again how well Rockwall is doing with over 55%. Collin, Fort Bend, Denton, Ellis, Williamson all have over 50% of their population. Randall, again, is in the Amarillo area, and they're still doing really well with response. Garden Ridge is a city in the San Antonio area, and then Mountain City is a small city in Hays County. And so we can really see here, Chavano is another one that's in the San Antonio area. We can really see here that suburban areas are performing fairly well for the state in terms of response. On the next slide, you'll see that you can actually change some of your selections, and you'll be able to see, so for instance, here I have the state of Texas selected, but I'm only looking at the population range of places and counties and cities that are over 500,000. And so you can see again, for the cities, now we're looking only at the larger cities, and the city of Austin is performing the best of the large cities here in Texas, but they're really neck and neck with the city of Fort Worth. And then you can see the same thing for the counties. If you click once more, I'll show you what it looks like when you change the total or internet to just total daily. You can see how some of these areas that are smaller places in Texas and smaller counties in Texas are the ones that are having a daily increase of over 1% compared to the 0.7 for the state. On the next slide, it's just a reminder to continue to share this information and how they're providing additional ways. So you can share the little share icon, and you're able to, paste your link when you go to the to both the map or the dashboard. You're able to either collect just the image. Next week, I'm going to show you how to pull data from that self-response map from the Census Bureau, because there is a data option as well. And then, of course, they have additional resources, including a video tutorial if you want to review that information. On the next slide, I just encourage everybody to please this Census Response Rate Challenge Toolkit has a lot of helpful information. Unfortunately, it was written before all of our social distancing orders were put in place. So many of the examples still include examples about hosting events and things of that nature. But they also have very useful resources at the end of the presentation or the toolkit. And they have examples of how you can get, you can identify a place that you want to compete with, whether it be a neighboring city. You can have a mayor challenge another mayor, or you can have just your community challenge itself and try to beat your 2010 goal or increase your 2010 goal by 5%. And it's a really nice way to sort of add some excitement around the census, to get people's attention in terms of friendly competition. And you saw those daily increases. We really do want to start to get more creative about and look for ways where people are encouraged to participate. So I encourage you to look at the toolkit and see if there are some areas that you can generate some friendly competition. I know, for instance, in 2010, Fort Worth and the city of Arlington joined a little competition where they were each going to declare either Fort Worth Matters in Arlington or Arlington Matters in Fort Worth, depending on which city beat the other in terms of self-response by a certain date. So take a look at it and see if there's some ideas there that you find enticing, that you can participate and get going in your community. On the next slide, I'm going to show you the CUNY Hard to Count map and just show you an additional feature that could be helpful. So for instance, this week, Genesis talked about how NALEO is going to have a Latinx sort of event for the week and really try to get self-response rates up for the Latino community. And so I wanted to point out that in the upper right corner of this map, there's an advanced tab that shows a filter. If you click on the next slide, I'll show you how you can make that work for yourself. So for instance, you would click that and it would bring down information on the number of the characteristic that I've chosen as Hispanic share of total pop. And then you can select whether it's greater than, equal to, or less than. And so I typed in Harris County. I selected percent of Hispanic share of total population that is greater than 40%, right? So greater than the state share. And then I submit and I get all of the census tracts within Harris County that have more than 40% of their population that is of Hispanic origin. And so you're able to see where in the Harris County area these census tracts fall. You're able to select an individual census tract from there. And so for instance, here, tract 3205, it has a 45.3% response. And so you're able to get that additional information for specific characteristics. And so I'll continue to share different resources and features of these mapping tools that are available to us. And if you have any particular questions or areas of interest that you want us to focus on, just let us know and we'll be sure to try to cover those in future weekly updates. And then on the next slide, of course, you can share this information again on different social medias. And now I also wanted to point out that they've added a new feature in that same area that says analysis. And the researchers at CUNY have been doing a weekly analysis of the characteristics of the census tracts and their response rate. And they're providing information. And so for instance, when they were looking at data from self-response and census tracts, one of the things that they've been finding, and this is a real challenge in the state of Texas, is that tracts that have a population that is predominantly Hispanic had the lowest response rate on average compared to other race ethnicities. So their response rate was about 30.5%. And then that was followed by African Americans with 35%, Asians at 41.8%, and then non-Hispanic whites at 42.5%. And so that really lets us know that there's some work to be done in the Hispanic community. And so efforts like the one that Naleo is putting together for this week are, really important in trying to make sure to address some of those issues. And so look for that analysis section in that share part of the CUNY map on a weekly basis. They usually release those either like on Thursday or Friday, but you can also see the previous reports in that same area. And I think this is all I have for today. If you'll click to the next slide, I think that's all. Yes, thank you.
I know that we have gotten a couple of questions and comments in our chat box as well, and it's in the Q&A. We'll circle back to those because I think they kind of go beyond the data a little bit, but hold tight. We'll make sure to respond to those. But now I would like to hand it over to Sarah from the City of Arlington. Again, very excited to have her on the call today to share out what the City of Arlington has been doing in terms of getting out the count in Arlington. So without further ado, Sarah, take it away.
All right, thanks, Katie, so much for having me. I'm Sarah Stubblefield. I've been working on census stuff as long as you all probably have. We started October of 2018 and put our complete count committee together in January of 2019. I also have my coworker here. He has really long nails and doesn't know when to lay down. That's my dog. His name is Henry. So hopefully we'll get it together. So we've been working on the census for a long time. When I'm not working on the census, I am working with neighborhoods and our community at large in different ways to engage them. So it was a really big opportunity to work on the census, and it's, I'm sure, like the rest of you, become my entire life. And so if you'll go to the next slide, Katie. So our committee and our approach, I know that different cities have taken different approaches to our complete counts. In Arlington, we really wanted it to be community leaders with a grassroots approach. In Arlington, we know kind of the main players, we know who we can count on, and we know who will help spread our message. But as you guys know, the census is about reaching the people that you don't normally reach to accomplish this task. So we have a committee that was really our community leaders in places that we don't always get good engagement from as a government. So our committee is not schooled necessarily in the ways of government, but we needed them to be able to get with those people that we don't always talk to. So we wanted to focus on that, but it was also really important for us to make sure that the personal experience of our committee combined with the census data that we already had with the Rome mapper and all those resources. Next slide. And so this is what we provided for our committee members. We started really early, so we had the opportunity to make sure that the information that we were developing our outreach with wasn't just perception, it was actually data driven, in addition with that community experience that we had. So for about 5 months, each week, we really made our committee dig into the data that was available from the census from different communities. So we had our Hispanic and Latino community one month, and our African American community, our Asian community, which are our highest racial demographics, and then also a deep dive into some other factors, our low income and our renter and transient community. And this allowed people to see, the true story of Arlington geographically as well as numbers wise, without, and being able to pair that with how people actually live in Arlington and their pockets of our city, 99 square miles of it. So we really did make sure that our committee was able to put together their personal experience with the community and also the data that we work with on a government level on a daily basis. Next slide, please. We also, it's not just me, I obviously couldn't do this by myself. We do have a small team, but when we put our team of staff together, we wanted to make sure that we were hitting all of the critical components for a successful outreach strategy. So our data analytics team, they've done the maps that I showed you on the last slide. They put those together for us, and many of our graphic displays, which I'll point out on the next slide as well. But we made sure that our communications team and our social media manager was a part of our building our outreach strategy and invested in the conversation about the census the whole way through, so that as we were talking with different leaders in our organization and our community, they were ready to push that message on our social media platforms and through our news outlets as well. And then, I bring the planning component where we really devised our outreach strategy like we would any long range plan, making sure that we had the data and the back input from the community to build our outreach strategy. So we really thought that having all those components leading this effort with our complete count committee would help us get the highest response rate possible. Next slide. And so we developed this weekly update. Our city leadership is extremely focused on data-driven decision-making, and they like to see the numbers and they like to see the data. But we wanted to make sure that whatever we put together was meaningful but simple. So, as we just saw, there's tons and tons of data out there and different ways to look at it. But we needed to pull out just the most important parts for our community and for our leadership so that they would know what they were looking at and kind of build that response rate challenge in and of itself. We use Vengage to build this graphic. We use Vengage. It's an online software that we have recently discovered. They build a lot of templates for marketing and business uses, but we found that it makes it easy for us to tell our government story in an attractive way. They have templates that we can already use, and then we do use GIS for the mapping that is on the left side of that screen. So the map shows a lot of data in a colorful way that maybe you don't realize you're getting as much data as you are. What we learned is people don't really know what census tract they live in, so we've left those census tract numbers completely off. But we've added major roadways and the lake and the different cities that are within our own boundaries, so that, you know, if somebody sees this map, they can figure out kind of where they are and how their part of town is doing, without cluttering it with census tract numbers. But we did pull out the top five responding census tracts and the bottom 5 responding census tracts, so you can see kind of what that disparity is. So a lot of information, but colorful and easy to read. And then, you know, we also did the graph, which actually is built within VinGauge. They make it really easy, and so it's color coordinated. We really like that feature. It's a little bit easier than importing from Excel, although I do have a separate Excel file that I update every single day, and does have, you know, that deeper dive of the data. But for what we're presenting to the public, we just wanted to show, you know, basic data, what the response rate was in 2010, how we're doing compared to that metric, and then how that compares to the response rates across the country, across the state, and within our own county, Tarrant County. Of course, we want to put that call to action at the bottom. I think that's one of the things that we've noticed in a lot of the Census Bureau offerings. A lot of their ads that are out there, they're super good, they're amazing, we love them, but we think they're missing that kind of call to action at the end that say, you know, go do your census now. So we wanted to make sure that what we were putting out there reminded people that they could still respond to the census. We send this graphic weekly out to our city council members and our city manager's office, sort of an update. We send it out to all of our Complete Count committee members to keep them engaged. And we do share on social media, so it's on Facebook and Twitter, so it's being consumed by the general public that we reach through those avenues. And again, the goals of that are to communicate our performance, to keep both our leadership and our community engaged, and to encourage that continued response. I think that's about it for me, unless there are any questions. But we found this tool to be really useful in just keeping the conversation going, and creating a little bit of competition to make people want to keep responding to the census and share it with their network. So we think this graphic is a quick and easy way to keep that conversation going in our community.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I apologize to you and folks on the webinar just because the graphics didn't come over as nicely. But I think this is, again, just a really great tool to let people, how can you really utilize that data and activate folks in your community. So if there are any questions for Sarah, feel free to pop them in the chat box, and we'll make sure that we get some answers to those. But thank you again, Sarah, for sharing out this great tool that y'all have created.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Now, to kind of wrap things up, we will talk a little bit about 2020 census outreach. There are 2 very outreach-specific questions in the chat box that we'll be talking about during this section, but let's go ahead and get started. So I pulled some resources for folks coming from our national group, Census Counts. As you know, as Genesis shared, we are now moving, or we are not moving, but the Census Bureau has been mailing out the paper copy of the form. And so if you are looking for just a quick and easy social media share, Census Counts has these great paper please social media graphics that I highly encourage you to use and share out. Of course, the message is that there is still time to fill out the census. So starting last Wednesday, homes that haven't responded to the census started receiving paper forms. That means that you have 3 ways to respond to the census: online, by phone, or through the mail. And just some reminders along with that. These paper copies, they are in English and in Spanish, depending on what type of mailing your area is getting, but the language guides are available from the Bureau in 59 non-English languages. And then when folks are receiving these paper forms in the mail, please remind them that there is no cost to send them back to the Census Bureau. You can just drop them in the mail without having to put any postage on them, or having someone come and pick it up, or you having to take it to the post office. So super quick and easy to get these paper copies, these paper forms back to the Census Bureau. In addition to that, I wanted to share out some messaging from the Census Counts campaign that, again, if you are looking for language for a tweet, a newsletter, a Facebook post, I thought this one was really great because, again, it responds directly to the crisis we're experiencing right now. People across Texas are keeping their families and communities safe and healthy by staying home or serving the public by providing essential services. Responding to the census yourself is another way to do your part and help keep your community strong. I know myself, I've been feeling this way, but I think at times we can feel a little hopeless and maybe not sure how we can really engage in our community and support our community. And so folks that might be feeling that same sense of not really knowing what to do, how to support others, just a gentle reminder that the census is a really critical and crucial way to make sure that you are keeping your community strong and healthy for the next decade. More specifically, I know a few weeks ago I shared out some of the resources that are kind of directly related to COVID-19 in terms of some resources and services that we're relying heavily on right now. And so here's just another reminder of what those are. I mean, our healthcare, our workforce assistance, food assistance, disability services, and senior services as well. And so again, when you're thinking about messaging and thinking about those resources that your communities are really utilizing during this time, do know that a lot of these are funded and informed by census data. So just a reminder. And then again, some example of some more messaging, just talking about how census data is critical for emergency planning. I also like this one at the bottom where it's like, we all have a part to play in protecting our communities and building a stronger future together. Again, telling folks to fill out the census. And again, I think this just kind of really, I know in the research, folks, a motivation to fill out the census is that thought of supporting your community and thinking about your community's future. And so again, use these in your social media posts, in your newsletters, just to get out the word about the census. Another thing that I wanted to share, and this is just kind of looking a little bit deeper into media trends, but this shouldn't be surprising to anyone on the call, but media consumption is up on all platforms, especially audio. When we think about audio, think about podcasts, people who are streaming music like on Spotify, and then also TV consumption is up as well. I wanted to also share that a lot of folks are tuning into the national news sources like CNN for information about the crisis, but local news is also getting a boost. And so with this in mind, if you haven't already engaged the local news in your area about the importance of the census or highlighting kind of the good work that you're doing in your community, I highly encourage you to reach out to them, whether it is print, radio, or on the TV. Again, folks are tuning into these sources as well. Also, data has shown that people are on social media now more than they were before. So again, when we think about how to really engage folks in our communities, even though they might be our online communities like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it might be, know that people are tuning in, and this is a really great way to get in touch with folks online. And then if you remember, we're continuing to do our Pivoting to Digital series, but we have recordings about Facebook if you're interested in doing a deeper dive. And last but not least, streaming is up as well. And so I know that we've all seen lots of different Facebook Lives or YouTube Lives events where folks are tuning in. So again, just thinking about how you can, knowing that people are tuning into these and using these resources a little bit more now, how can you kind of strategize to tap into this viewership that's happening across our state and country? And last but not least, I won't walk through this entire slide with you, but just kind of wanted to put some ideas before you in terms of pivoting. We'll make sure that folks get this slide deck at the end, but again, just thinking about how you can utilize phone or social media, going live with events, email blasts, newsletters. Some really simple things in terms of social media are connecting with local influencers in your community who might not necessarily know too much about the census, but maybe you could educate them and they could go live or do a post. Also, Facebook frames are they don't cost anything. And so if you do want to create Facebook frames for your community and just make sure that folks are using those, and then video challenges are very popular as well. Thinking about going live or connecting with others through virtual events, but also there's new social distancing tools that are out there. For example, you can have a Netflix streaming party. So maybe you're getting families together to watch a movie on Netflix, but you're also in that comment section just doing little gentle reminders about filling out the census and why it's so important. Again, I know a lot of folks have already pivoted to partnering with essential locations in their neighborhoods and making sure that you're getting collateral to them, whether it be stickers, flyers, palm cards, yard signs, door hangers, etc. Again, I think this is a really good connection point to actually reach folks in our communities. And then last but not least, thinking about outreach to the media. Again, local media, ethnic media is your friend in this work, and thinking about how you can get potentially on the air to share about the census, because we know people are tuning in. And then snail mail is not dead. And so if you are able to send collateral through the mail, do know that is still an option. And then, of course, my reminders at the end, just sharing out 2020census.gov or my2020census.gov is where you go to fill out the form, and then all of the toll-free numbers to respond to the census. And then this a resource page that I've had on the page again is just NALEO's COVID-19 digital toolkit. Texans Care for Children has an English and Spanish digital toolkit. Census Counts COVID-19 resources. If you are interested in learning a little bit more about digital organizing, there's a great series right here. You can just choose which recorded webinar you'd like to check out. And then, of course, texascounts.org for all things Texas. Whew, lots of resources, lots of information. I do know that we are getting some questions and thoughts in our chat box. And I want to respond to Gloria first. She's asked, do we know what the best practices are in the areas with really high participation? Gloria, that is a great question, and we actually haven't reached out to folks yet to kind of figure out what they're doing. But my goal before next Monday is to reach out to some of those cities and counties with those high self-response rates to see, one, if we can potentially get them to join us, but two, also see if we can get some of those practices that they're using and see if they might be able to work for your community as well. Great question. Kelly was thinking about an idea around how to coordinate social media outreach efforts beyond Census Day. Kelly, you've read our mind. I mean, we've seen the data that we had that big jump in self-response on Census Day. And so at Texas Counts, we're trying to think about what are some other days or that we can really kind of elevate all of our voices and amplify all of our voices around census outreach and get out the count efforts. So do know that we are definitely thinking about how to kind of have a collective effort on everyone in Texas engaging in this work to have some type of organized digital strategy. So yes, we are thinking about it. And if anyone does have any ideas around that, would love to hear your thoughts. But do know that we're also trying to think about how we can recreate some of that Census Day magic in terms of a collective effort. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh,
So
go
we
ahead, Joseph.
yeah, thank you, Katie. So Elena asks, and maybe Lila can help us with this too. Do you know when the census will be counting census of university students who reside on campus, or if they have already done so? I work in a college town and all of the dorms have been closed. Our council is very worried about these students who live on campus that would have been counted but are now at home. Do you know if these students will be counted as if they still live on campus? So this is kind of a complicated, this operation was complicated by the current situation. As you guys remember, we all went kind of into isolation around the time that a lot of students would have been either going to spring break or coming back from it. And so students should still continue to be counted where they would have been on April 1st. But the Census Bureau should have continued to work with that college, with that college in particular, to say, hey, how do we want to continue counting these students? My suggestion here is that I would definitely talk to your, if you have a contact there who's in charge of housing, ask them, let them know, hey, did you hear from the Census Bureau? And then if you need additional support, please feel free to reach out to any one of us and we can put you in contact with a specialist, or we can try to find out what kind of count they did during, as a result of this. So Maria Belem says, one key area to focus that could potentially assist right now is Census 2020 awareness is in the education sector. Teachers are having to do remote online teaching for all their students. Those of us that have the opportunity remind teachers to include Census 2020 as part of lessons, or for lessons to include their parents. I think this is a great reminder. There's definitely a lot of resources out there that were created prior to the current circumstances that could still be used. The Census Bureau has a ton of educational materials as well that people can either incorporate into a lesson plan, or just simply say, hey, the census is here. Please make sure to talk to your parents about filling it out. Don't forget. So definitely a great suggestion, and we can continue to have conversations about what that could look like. Alex says, when will we see the results from the census, i.e. increased Congressional House of Reps and increased funding to the state? So by law, the census, essentially the data has to be given to the White House on December 31st. Dr. Valencia, I don't know if you want to add anything here.
Sure. Yeah. So basically, like Genesis said, the data go to the president's office by December 31st. That's when they're scheduled. This is a constitutional mandate. As far as we know, none of the operational delays have affected these constitutional mandates as of yet. And hopefully they won't. And so that's when apportionment is known. That's when we actually get to figure out how many congressional seats each state will receive. And then in the next year, starting in February up until April 1st, is the next constitutional mandate that involves the redistricting data. And so Texas has to receive its redistricting data by April 1st, but really we want to receive it sooner than that, as close to February, when they start delivering it to governors in the different states, so that Texas can begin its redistricting process, because that's when they are in legislative session and they need to have that done before the legislative session is over, in order to make sure that it's done in that way, rather than, because otherwise the Texas Constitution requires that a redistricting board of 5 members then has to draw districts if the legislature doesn't do it by the end of that regular session. So those states, as far as we know, have not been impacted yet by operational delays, but we will definitely keep you posted if anything does change. And I also just want to add on to Elena about the count for college students. There are some resources that it's like a real one-pager document that really does a flow chart of, if you live here and then you should be counted in this way. If you lived off campus, you should be counted in this other way. And we can definitely share that resource so that you're able to communicate that and share with your student populations as well. We do know that the group quarters count was also delayed, but they tried to do a lot of that information or that counting electronically. These are FERPA protected data. And so the stimulus package and that sort of bill did not include a lax in FERPA restrictions. And so colleges and universities still have to be very careful as to what they're able to share for students under FERPA regulations. And so it's still an issue that's being resolved, but there are ways that students who don't live on campus can be counted. And then lastly, I think I would also just mention for Maria is the Census Bureau has a statistics in school program. And we just had an educator here in Texas. She's like an educator of 20 years. She put together a real brief tutorial on how teachers can get onto Google Classroom and be able to share resources from statistics in schools with their teachers and with the students. I also know it's a simple enough to use tool that parents who are looking for ways to fill, the time of their kids while they're at home, that they're able to use some of those resources too. And so perhaps in the summary email that we send, we can include both the college count information as well as some information on this statistics in school tool that the Census Bureau has put together.
Thank you, Dr. Valencia. The other question is, what is the predicted lag in time between when a questionnaire has been received by the Census Bureau and when it is actually processed and available in the reporting? I imagine with the stay-at-home orders, there's a considerable lag. So from my understanding on the paper questionnaires, they're still receiving them and they can still essentially say, hey, we've received X questionnaire from X household. Whether the processing of the actual data is running behind, but the predicted lag in time is, I think, about 24 hours. It's because they do have to, update essentially what their hard to count, the Rome map. And so there is a little bit of a lag, but it's not as significant as we might think even during this time. Maria Camacho shares that they've been asking surrounding agencies to post census reminders on their websites, especially the city and the county. People look into the websites for emergency information. This is a great best practice. I think that that's definitely one of the big things here in Harris County. The county has been doing a good job of trying to insert a census message even as they're reporting out on COVID-19 updates. And so definitely if you have connections with your cities and counties or essential services, asking them to share information on a website is a really great way to remind people because people are going to be looking to them for other key information. I think that's all the questions that we had. We'll definitely make sure to compile all of the things that we've mentioned and send it along with the recording and the slides. Katie, anything else?
The only thing I would say, we're going to wrap up a little bit early today, but it's there, and like I said, we'll continue sharing out operations as well as the data and outreach efforts that we're hearing happening across the state. But if there is anything else that you would like us to do a deeper dive on, feel free to email me at martin@ctripp.org, or you can just pop it in the chat box now, because again, we want to make sure that these weekly updates are responding to your needs and getting out the count in your communities. So if there is something you'd like us to cover in a little bit more detail, feel free to pop it in the chat box now or shoot me an email. But if not, thank you again so much for joining us for this week's weekly update. We hope to join you all again next Monday at noon Central Time. But yeah, without further ado, thanks again for joining us. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, pop them in the chat box, and we'll see y'all next week. Thanks so much.